right, so let's talk about layer masks, um, clipping masks, quick masks, and the selection tools that we can use to create those different kinds of masks. So on this file, I just have this image of these pots, and then underneath I have this checkerboard so you can um, see what's going on. Like you'll be able to have a good visual when I start masking some of this, the images of the pot. So just to recap, layer masks are a non-destructive way to quickly isolate or hide certain parts of your image on a specific layer. So to add a layer mask, we just have to select this icon here, the rectangle with the circle inside, and you see that it adds the layer mask right next to it. Everything white, you'll see it's completely white. White means the image that it's connected to, everything is going to show through. Now, if I were to fill this layer mask, I'll just select it with black, then that image would be hidden. So we can adjust that layer, like adjust what is hidden, what is revealed through the brush tool. And we can work within black, white, or different shades of gray. So let's go into white with our brush, and I can reveal the image. And if I switch back to black, just pressing X, I can hide different parts. And if you see I'm using gray, some of them will have like a lower opacity. Let me just clear all of that. Go back to black. And let's do, oops. Just make a quick line right through the middle. Now with my layer mask selected, making sure I'm not on that image, I'm on the layer mask. You'll see in the properties panel that we have a couple different things we can play around with. Now we can select this dotted square to grab that selection, and this is something that I find really useful in my own image editing. I'll like grab that selection, maybe grab a new layer and then fill it with pink, or you know, do my editing. But this is a good way to like bring your selection over to another layer that you need to do a separate editing on. Excuse me. We can also adjust the density, so that opacity of that layer mask. We could feather it out, so you see the line starts to get a little bit blurred. And this is great if you have something you're trying to select that is a little bit fluffy. There's not many hard edges. Think of something like a cloud, or I'm also thinking like food, if you're doing like food photography, sometimes like nature. This way you can sort of get other bits of the background without losing that image. So we could feather it out or keep it nice and tight. And we can also invert, seeing how my selection, or like what is revealed, is now hidden, vice versa. All right, so let's talk about clipping masks next. Clipping masks are in Photoshop are going to be kind of like the opposite of Illustrator, where in Illustrator we had our clipping tool object or clipping object on top of the thing we were clipping. In this case, we want it sort of reverse. So I'm going to just grab this image of the pots. I'm going to go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Let me undo. Let me delete this layer mask. And now I have the pink squiggly on the bottom. Layer, create clipping mask. And now what I can do is play around with this layer to hide and reveal what's on top. So this layer 2 with the pink squiggly, I can fill in parts of it with my brush tool. I could use my eraser tool to hide different parts. So it works very similarly to a layer mask, but we're not doing that selection aspect of it. So I'm going to right click and release clipping mask, and then just move that down to the bottom. Now the last thing I want to talk about in terms of masking is the quick mask. That's hotkey Q, or it's this icon here right below your colors. And quick mask allows you to, oops, I need my brush, essentially paint on what you want revealed or hidden. So I'm just gonna grab these pots, press Q, and now I have these pots selected. I can go ahead and do a clipping mask like that, invert it, whichever way I want. Now let's delete that. What's really nice about the quick mask is if you're someone who likes to spend a lot of time sort of getting those right sort of brush strokes and like getting that precision down on objects, you know, you can use eraser tool and brush tool, and it puts this red overlay on it. Oh, Q. So that your it's quite easy to mask with, or to create those layer masks eventually. So let's go ahead and delete that layer mask. Now I want to talk about the different types of selection we can use to create those different masks. So starting off with the marquee tool M, you can use any of like either the rectangular or the elliptical. And what this does is you're drawing out a square or, you know, rectilinear selection. And we can mask like that. The control panel up here, you'll notice that there is the square, the double square, the subtract, and then the intersect. So if I have the double square, this means additive. Anytime I make my selection, it will add to that selection. Now if I want to subtract from that selection, I would do the subtract, and intersect will just show where the previous selection was versus my new selection. So if I have this sort of like odd shape selection and then do intersect everything that is within that new rectangle I'm making, will be selected. And I'm just going to Command D to deselect. And we can do the same thing with the ellipse. Command D. The next selection tool we can use is the pen tool, P. And you should be familiar with the pen tool from Illustrator. It works essentially the same thing, or sorry, essentially the same way, where we're creating anchor points to follow along. So let's close this path. And then from here, we can go up to the control panel, make selection, undo, or I can make mask, undo, or make a shape. So I can outline this and make a solid shape, or a mask, or selection. I'm just going to delete that pen tool. Okay, then we have our lasso tool, which is L, but if we pull out, there's a couple different kinds of lasso tools here. So lasso tool allows you to sort of draw, make that selection. Again, we can add to it, we can delete from it, and so on. There's also the, let's do Command D, deselect, the poly lasso tool, which this is great for rectilinear forms, anything with like harder edges or like, you know, hard angles. And then there is the selection brush tool, which again will work similar to that quick mask. And you see if I just select into my selection tool, it'll generate those selection paths for me. I can edit and do what I want with that. So let's enter Command D, deselect. And I'm going to leave that lasso tool. The next three tools are, let's start with object selection tool, hotkey W for all of these. And this uses AI to sort of figure out what is the object in your image. And you can just select. We can do the plus to select everything, to make multiple selections, and then mask. Let's undo, Command D to deselect. So this one's probably going to be pretty useful, but it also depends on your objects. I have this nice white background to contrast from, so really depends on your image. There's also quick selection tool, which again, sort of Photoshop is figuring out what is your object, like where your object begins and ends based on like color and value, different values and light. It's not perfect. Like you see, I missed a spot here, but it does a pretty good job. And we can mask and see the results. Undo, deselect. And then lastly, we have the magic wand tool, which you can set different settings for to figure out what you want to be selecting. So for example, if I want to select all this green, if you see, I have to click, 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 click. Maybe let's up the tolerance to 50, and it will select more of my object. And you see I have that additive on, so the more I select, the more I'll get here. And it's not quite perfect, but it's really good for selecting more solid colors. And then Photoshop also has a select subject feature if we have like one of the magic wand tools. Let's go back to magic wand tool. If we have that open in the control panel, we can select the subject, and Photoshop will do its best to select that subject so we can mask or edit. Now, one last thing before I end this demo. With the selection, I can also do transformative edits to this. So if I go Command or Control T, I can edit these once they're selected directly to make them you know, bigger, smaller, or let's right click, warp, and I can make fun edits this way. And even if just adding a couple grid marks, just sort of change the shape of it. And we do lose a little bit of resolution here. Just pressing enter and then deselect. We lose some resolution, but we still get that fun transformative effect from our selection. So I can go back, Command T, maybe we'll distort it. Enter, deselect. You get the idea. All right, that's about it.